Mr. Smith, welcome. Good to see you again.
Evening, members of the board.
And we're so brief on your homework on the self-storage.
Yes, so good evening. The memo that you have dated January 22nd is a follow-up from our work session in November, where there were, I thought it was very productive to hear concerns and comments about from the board relative to self-storage facilities. With that, I've had an opportunity to look at some of the market data, talk with some of the professionals. I've done some consideration about the concerns that were raised. I've had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Capicato. I have I have a Capican in Buchanan, so my apologies. Yeah, okay. So with that, part of the discussion that I heard is that there's a concern about certainly the number of self-storage facilities that you have. You have 3 and a 4th one, which is on the northern border. You have a number there. The main concern that I heard was that these types of facilities aren't necessarily the best use in the village of Elmsford, in and around, I think, the central business district, where there would be a spin-off of foot traffic to retail activity. So I took that to heart, and in evaluating those types of uses, it's noted that somebody had asked a question about, well, is there any examples of the reuse of these types of facilities in the event that they fail? And my discussion with the real estate professionals, there's virtually no known examples of reuse of self-storage facilities, because they typically have an excellent rate of return as far as a real estate investment. There are a number of examples of other commercial facilities or industrial facilities that are converted to self-storage uses. And I think from a market standpoint, whenever you have significant residential, particularly multifamily development activity within a community, pretty soon after that, you have self-storage facilities to follow. And this is a trend to look throughout Westchester County. I have a recent example. One of my clients is the village of Sleepy Hollow. And if you're familiar with the property on North Broadway, right across the street from Open Door, which is a contractor's yard. And the village has been approached by a developer who wants to put in a self-storage facility. And, it makes sense, because right down the road is the General Motors. So I haven't finished my report yet to the village board, but I think the considerations that you all have raised about the kind of the relationship between self-storage and commercial facilities is something that needs to be reflected, I think, in any type of use you're considering. So with that, I started to look at some of the locational requirements, and part of the memo includes an evaluation of, in the event that you still want to consider having self-storage uses within the village, where does it make the most sense? And then in working with Capicato, we put together some initial zoning framework for you to consider, because right now there's nothing on your books that really regulates self-storage facilities as that particular use. I think, Tony, you treat them as a retail use in general terms.
Yeah.
So
Retail warehouse.
retail warehouse. So the point is to get to more specific standards that you can use to regulate those types of uses. So in the package that I provided to you, there's a graphic that has the map, and we're suggesting that given the concerns about the relationship with the retail component within the village, that the central business district is certainly an area where you don't want to encourage or have self-storage uses. And then where you have adjacent zoning districts, even though a light industrial might make sense to have that type of use, but where it's immediately adjacent to the CB district, we're suggesting that perhaps that is not an area that we want to encourage. Similarly with the B district, is just located just north of the the CB district, and the B district that's located to the east along East Main Street, going out towards the Springbrook. And the LI that's located south of the CB, same concept. If it's adjacent to your commercial district, that's probably not an area you want to have or encourage the self-storage use. So that leaves a couple of areas, the B district west of Summer Park, where we have the majority of your facilities located already, allow those that are already there. The area that's located is the LI district that's north of 287, and perhaps the B district that's north of 287. Again, because there's a physical separation between those two districts, that area and the commercial district that's located more in the heart of the village. And then the other areas are the B district that's east of the Springwood Parkway, and perhaps the LO district, which is the office district over by Knollwood. So I guess I would first want to hear from a locational standpoint, is the board comfortable with allowing additional, these types of uses in kind of these outlying zoning districts? Is that something that's still, is that an acceptable approach? And you've used this kind of approach where you had geographic limitations on particular uses. For instance, the drive-through and fast food, when you limit the types of uses. So it's not unusual in the village in Elmsford to have geographic limitations on particular types of uses. So that's the first thing to think about. I think the other comments, again, codifying what is a self-storage facility. We've suggested some regulations. These are things that have come up in other communities that I've worked in. I'm reviewing an application in town Somers for a self-storage facility. And some of the issues that they have raised about no outdoor storage, everything has to be inside. Hazardous materials, landscaping and screening. The one thing I think that Tony had raised is whether you want to have hours of operation on these types of facilities. I mean, typically, if you go to one, you need a key fob or something similar to get in. So once you do, the owner operator knows who's in the facility, at what time you came in. So there's significant amount of security that is already built into these types of facilities. The parking requirements, a lot of these facilities are generally open park. So I think that the parking requirements that Tony and I have discussed are in keeping with the industry standard and certainly with what you have here in the village. And then in the event with respect to parking, if you had a smaller facility that came in and it didn't necessarily meet the minimum requirements, you have to have at least 2 to 3 parking spaces to service a smaller facility. So that's a review of where I've tried to summarize the issues for you on behalf of the comments that were raised, and be happy to answer any questions or further discussion. Unless Tony, do you have anything else?
No.
Hey, what's your thought on some of the storage places have like a outside entrance where like a garage where you can drive a vehicle in it?
Mhm.
What's your thought of those? Because then you would have a vehicle inside the storage place, which would have the gas in the car, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the ones that we don't, but they do, I've seen them.
In other words, storage of automobiles.
Yeah, in other words, if sometimes they have the unit, we go inside,
Yeah.
they have a row of like garages underground, you can drive into and
Right.
get from the ground.
Yeah, that's the example that I cited in Somers. One of the big needs is storage of antique cars. Not surprising. So they have, and again, I would ask Tony, if you have a facility like that where you're storing vehicles, would need to be sprinkled? There'd be fire code.
Either way, based on the size of the building, it's gonna be sprinkled, and a car is moderate hazard, low hazard storage, so
Mhm.
I think a car fits in with the same as what the rest of the building would be.
And in some of these, just as another example, there, there's a facility in, Patterson that I'm aware of where, they rent out units to contractors. Because the units can be oversized, and a lot of times if a contractor has a van and they want to store their equipment, that's an opportunity for them. Where they don't necessarily have to have a separate yard or a separate property, but they can use the enclosure of a storage facility as kind of their base of operations.
Yeah, I've seen landscapers do that, so then they got the lawnmowers and the leaf blowers. So, why don't we, why don't we take this and digest it? And we'll read it, and then we'll invite you back. You know, this way we can, sit, try and read it now and.
That's fine.
Go through everything, we'll invite you back, and we have some time, and we'll,
So procedurally, once you've had time to review it in a little bit more detail, if you have some comments or suggestions on location, if you feel comfortable with kind of the draft language or the parameters that we've established here as part of the memo, and you feel comfortable, then we can take the next step, which is actually preparing the legislation for you to consider, and we can get that process rolling. Is there anything else we can do?
We're just gonna double check the dates on the 90-day to see if we'll have to extend it. Are you thinking next meeting or March 4th
we
meeting?
can be quick, just
Next week.
give, yeah, just everybody give more time to read and make comments and.
Process will be then at that meeting, so if one of the things that would help speed it up, like Dave just said, if you have information or thoughts on ideas, locations, please get them to us. Because after that meeting, then the local law will have to be drafted, then come to you, then set the public hearing. So we might be bordering on it 90 days, so I'll double check that and I'll let you know, and if we have to extend it, we extend it. We could extend it 30 days or 60 days.
When's next meeting?
20th.
If we could include in that drafting a ban on the lithium ion batteries as being stored materials. I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah, I think, Trustee Henry, one of the, in the memo, we include, a passage here that talks about hazardous materials being prohibited. Storage of gasoline and other volatile petroleum products, radioactive materials, explosive compound or hazardous chemicals should be prohibited. So we may want to, include, what's the correct term? Is it the e-batteries? Is that?
Just lithium ion batteries, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea to specify that in addition to overall hazmat.
I don't know if we necessarily want to say just lithium batteries, because there's laptops have and things like that, so.
But those are all lithium. The older nickel cadmium batteries don't have that issue with the.
Right, but I know, but anything that's like a quick turnaround charge is.
Right.
A lithium battery, I mean, people. Or a phone or something, I mean, we're thinking really more e-bikes and e-car and the electric values of cars.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
See you in a couple of weeks and we'll do our homework.
Very good. Have a good evening.
If anybody has any ideas, like I said, send them to us and we'll send it to David.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Some, and, thank you. Nice job as always, thank you. Next is to review the firefighter tank exemption law.
This is a draft of the law that we talked about at the last meeting. Included in it, first for everybody, since we have several firefighters here, this is a law that is being amended. It's currently on the books. We had it previously, and then we continued it when we gave up the assessment with the town of Greenberg. And the law is basically the same. There's very little changes, but the new law, which went statewide, required us to adopt a new law within 2 years to go with the new state law. So this law, the options within the law were an exemption of up to 10% on the value, assessed value of the property. This draft is at 10%. It describes the eligibility and the eligibility item, which is an option is it's 2 to 5 years, and this calls for 2 years, which is the lowest. Application procedure, I'm going to come back to in a second. The exemptions for individuals, this grants, which is an option, a lifetime exemption for members of 20 years or more of active volunteer service. At the time that they also have they already have the exemption, and their primary residence is still located within the village. This law also provides for the unmarried spouse of an enrolled member killed in the line of duty, as long as they are unmarried, to continue the exemption as well, as long as the residence continues in the house and they were a member, they were getting the exemption when they died in the line of duty. It also provides for the unmarried spouse of the 20-year or more member to also continue the exemption under those same guidelines. The item I want to come back to, and those are all the items that we spoke about last time. I believe what majority of the villages are doing similar. This is pretty much the bill that the town of Greenberg is going to do. The assessor was hoping that we were all going to match, but I don't think that's going to happen. The one item is certification of what is considered an active member. Right now, it's very subjective that this would be left to basically the fire chief to say they're an active member or not. One of the recommendations that, and one of the things that we've talked about is that we would define that a little further, in that making a minimum requirement of 5 or 10% of fire service awards annually. So that's the one item that's up for discussion right now. Just to back up a second on that, the state didn't provide any definition, which I was on the phone today with NICOM as well as 2 state senators to try to get that fixed. But the state basically passed the buck on to the local municipalities. And it makes sense really makes more sense for there to be a state definition. So the state law is under the authority and under the same rules of everything. You know? So that one's not going to go anywhere fast.
So is the question currently pending whether we go forward with it as is?
The real question. We didn't change anything from the last time we spoke about it. The only question that the item that I'm kind of to talk about is, it basically says here, the village of Elmsford will provide annually a file with the assessor prior to that status, a list of active volunteer members who are certified to meet the minimum service requirement. Okay. That's vital. That's minimum could be, you're on the roster. I mean, that's not what the intent of this is. The intent of this is that you're an active participating volunteer firefighter. So the suggestion is that we go to 5 or 10% of fire service awards requirement, which isn't a lot. Fire service awards requirement is 50 points. So we would be talking 5 points, which is not that difficult to get. Then wrong you. So that's what the recommendation.
Trustee Henry, any suggestions on that?
Someone who has been an active participating member for 20 years, over the 20th year, I think more latitude could be given. But under 20 years, I agree that there should be response and activity requirements included.
The 20-year, once they're at 20 years, they automatically get it.
Okay. All right, so then we're talking anywhere from 0 to 20. Yeah, there should be some kind of criteria.
What's your suggestion though, to do the mirror the service award program or to do the reduced number?
Probably a reduced number. Albeit the service award requirements aren't really excruciating, but for something along these lines, maybe it could be a partial.
Like you were saying,
10% is what my.
10%, because that's what the other one says. That's what they're talking about, the VOC.
Yeah, but
Some of them,
they're never gonna get to that,
no,
but
there were some guys who were
Yes.
saying something.
it's something that the town wants to get to too, but somebody has to go first.
That would be a good scale to use, though.
Yeah, I mean, 10% is 5 points.
Correct.
It's that's one call, a meeting, a drill. An officer, there's your 5 points. It basically covers, of the people I know, I believe that had the exemption now, it basically. They're all, maybe one person's not very close. They're all doing that now. And or they already have 20 years.
Right.
Hey, trustee Henry, okay with the 10% and the law or how it's written, the rest of it?
Yes, sir.
Sorry?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Coyle, same question?
Yes, sir.
Trustee Evans?
I'm good.
Trustee Lopez? Everybody good with, we'll put it on the agenda. The beauty tax cap local law we do every year.
So. Basically, it's way too early for me to tell you whether you're gonna be over or under it. I did some, preliminary numbers today. You're gonna probably be over it, but being over it doesn't mean you're gonna increase taxes, because the number is pretty large. I mean, in terms of the percentage, because of our growth factor, the inflation rate is 2%. And actually this year, which is, it's good news on one end, but bad news on the other, there's actually exemptions that are built into the category because of the rates of the retirement system. When they raise the rates, some of that gets excluded. So it's bad because I'm paying it over here, but I'm getting a credit over here, but they're not, they're not washing. I want to say the number off the top of my head is a little over $700,000 addition to the current appropriations in the general fund. I think we're going to be over that slightly, but at that number, I think the taxes would be, the tax rate would reduce about 1%. So you're not talking big numbers. On the other tune of this, and what we've done from day one, really at the recommendation of Nikon, is we've adopted this whether we're going to be over it or not. And what that has to do with is there was a mistake at the end. And the state came in and said, oh no, you said you were under the cap, but because this and this and this, you're over, now you got a penalty and you got to pay that back. It's a mess. And I can tell you how small it can be. So when we do our tax levy every year, the tax levy itself is off. When you adopt your budget, that's 99% sure that that's not going to be the tax levy. Tax levy is going to be $2 higher or lower. And I'm talking $2, $50 or $60. And it just has to do with whatever the final assessment number is, because you don't have the final assessment number when you're doing the budget. So that number this year, I can tell you, because if you remember, we weren't, or last 2 years, we weren't that far off the cap. The 2 years ago, that number pushed you over the cap by like $10. So had you not did the local law to override it, you would have got your hands stuck. So that's the other reason. So again, the next step of this is to hold a public hearing and go from there.
Trustee Henry, okay for the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Trustee Baldwin?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Evans? Thank you, sir. Trustee Lopez? Thank you, sir. Review the 119 complete streets.
So this kind of goes back to a few years where we were working with the state had hired a consultant to work with the village on doing a bike path and some other pedestrian friendly issues through the village. Basically, it was from White Plains to Tarrytown. And the money came from the new bridge project as part of enhancing the bridge, enhancing pedestrian right of ways and really bike path stuff. We got to the point, COVID slowed it down a little bit, but then also it got too big. The study got too big, the amount of money got too big. The trying to get through the main section of downtown here was an issue from White Plains to there. The bridge project, they were all issues. Actually, the way the new bridge is designed, it's not as big as an issue anymore, but so it's been scaled back. It's been scaled back from Tarrytown, basically from the bridge to the bike trail. And it makes a whole lot more sense. The state's all behind that. So the next problem recently has been nobody has any money to do it or no money willing to do it. So the town planner, Garrett, and I were looking at some stuff, and we have them listed here, the RAISE grant and then the county complete streets, and we believe both of those funding opportunities this project falls into. The town has committed to doing really most of the legwork. All we would have to do is, some resolution, couple letters of support, they'll actually do the application. Garrett's looking into a few other things at this point, if there's a match, which at this point, we don't believe there is. And we're looking probably to be applying for about $2 million. That's what it's gonna take to do this. Tarrytown is going to their board now to find out if they're interested. And all I'm here to find out, are you interested? Which is at this point, no commitment. It's saying to the town, yeah, we want to do this, or don't waste your time. And then finalize it down.
And this will be from the bridge, the entrance to.
Correct. Bike path, both ways on the correlating side of the road, because at one time the design was. There would be, both ways on one side of the road, which actually was the south side. Now it's. Eastbound is on the north side, westbound is on the south side. And other than. Really, that whole stretch, the only issues really are the ramps of 287 and 87 out here a little bit. And, with a lot of paint, they can be made safer. So if everybody's okay, I'll let Garrett know that we're interested and let him wave his magic wand.
Trustee Henry, okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Sir, trustee Coffey?
Yes, sir.
Trustee Evans?
It sounds great.
Thank you. Trustee Lopez? Motion to adjourn the work session?
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed, carried. Please rise and call me to pledge allegiance.